Welcome to New York, Philip K. Dick Science. Welcome to your. Seems we're having this issue again. Okay, great. I think this was some issue again. It's kind of humorous. Okay, got it. Excellent. All right, we're having some reverb, but we've had this issue in the past. I'm not sure what is the. Let me see. Okay, got it. Okay, well, I think we finally welcome again. This is myself, not a repeat. This is Stan from the Philip K. Dick Film Festival. I'm the organizer, and this is a part of our series called Philip K. Dick Talks, where we interview authors who are on the cutting edge, exploring really areas of human experience that are often misunderstood or at least overlooked. And I'm very happy now to bring Sarah Jane here. So we'll bring you Sarah. Thank you for coming. Sarah is the author of Welcome to the Dream Initiation into Dream Mysteries, Drinking from the Pool of Mnemosyne. Hopefully, I got
Oh,
that
that
correct.
was perfect.
Fantastic. So, for those who are not familiar with Sarah's work, she's an enthusiastic lucid dreamer since childhood. She's a writer, public speaker, and sleep hypnosis workshop and retreat facilitator. Sarah is the co director and curator of Dream Palace Athens, a multidisciplinary symposium, festival, and residency project in Greece. She runs Explores Egyptology, an online lecture series, and with Carl Hayden Smith operates the Seventh Ray, a mixed reality mystery school. She's also the producer and co-host for Anthony Peake's Consciousness Hour podcast. Sarah is currently working with the British Pilgrimage Trust and biologist Ruber Sheldrake to reinvigorate the practice of dream incubation at sacred sites. She lives in Hastings, England. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think a lot of people often have this idea that dreams are just something that represent ad hoc or bizarre experiences during the day, but they really don't have any meaning other than that. You have this group, and you get the groups who are always looking for something that is not there in their dreams. So when I came across your work, I really was very excited because I was hoping to perhaps shed some light on what dreams are all about. And your book title is certainly very intriguing. That these dreams can be almost a form of initiation into another level of being or thinking. So I'm hoping that you can explain to us how you. I understand from your bio that you've been a lucid dreamer for a long time, but how did it all come about, and how has that impacted your life? You can just walk us step by step through baby steps back to the present.
Well, I can't really remember a time when I wasn't into dreaming. I just remember being into a dream aesthetic, and that's why I love Philip K. Dick books and Philip K. Dick films, because they're kind of dreamy to me. They're fantasy and weird and symbolic, and I appreciate that kind of thing in art. So I was lucid dreaming since I was a kid. I can remember dreams from being a toddler, and it's always been like a deeply enriching part of my life. And I did go through a brief period of time when I wasn't remembering my dreams when I had my daughter, actually. So that's sort of what inspired me to start researching it and thinking about it a bit more, because once I got lucid dreaming back, I was so appreciative of it. I realized like how much it can improve and enhance your life, basically.
How will you there are certainly various types of dreams and dream experiences. So how will you, for those who are novices here, how will you break that down for us? I mean, how do you, I mean, dreams, a lot of people, I mean, I personally keep track of my dreams. I've been doing that for quite some time, for several years now, but a lot of people don't do, they barely remember their dreams. So how do you begin even the process of engaging with that other reality?
Well, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the ancient history and culture of dreaming. So my book is really me looking into, from the perspective of someone who's really experienced with lucid dreaming and, you know, very familiar with the experience, looking back over ancient dream texts and the kinds of rituals and cultures around dreaming, which there have been for millennia, basically. So I was looking at the history from kind of ancient Anatolia through ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece. And that has really been very inspirational to me, because there does seem to be some consistency with categorizing dreams, in so far as some dreams are seen as being divine. And I would argue that they are the lucid dreams, where you have epiphanies, where you have contacts with divine beings. There are dreams which are seen as being riddles or clues, whereby you can work out what might occur to you in the future. And what's very interesting when you start looking at ancient dream texts is that there was this incredible preoccupation with dreams predicting the future, with precognition, with not necessarily seeing things that are going to happen exactly the same in the future, much more this kind of oracular dreaming, whereby you receive clues, hints, symbols, stories that somehow reveal. Quite often they involve wordplay and punning in dreams. So there was a whole art to dream interpretation in the ancient world across all sorts of cultures. So in the ancient world, there's this consistency with categorizing dreams according to the divine dream, which I would say would be lucid, this riddle type dream, potentially precognitive, and the dreams which are kind of just your day reworking and replaying itself.
Well, it's I remember, in fact, just when you mentioned Greece, that was one of my first lucid dreams when I was in many years ago. I just had stepped out of my. It was literally the first day in Greece. I was exhausted, so I took a nap. I had been reading Stephen LaBerge's book on lucid dreaming, which for some is a good intro to that. And I remember it was the early afternoon. I took a nap, and all of a sudden, I'm in this wild world where I'm aware that I'm dreaming. And then all of a sudden I said, this is so cool. So I decided, well, I'm just going to do this motorcycle ride. And I was going at thousands of miles per hour. And it was really an awesome experience. I mean, I've had some challenges in recreating those dreams, those lucid dreams from time to time. And I think a lot of it is, from my understanding, there's a certain kind of a protocol that you follow in order to engage more lucid dreaming. Can you just speak a little bit about that?
The thing that I'm really interested in, and actually you talking about your lucid dream there in Greece, I wonder if maybe you were sleeping on the site of an ancient sleep temple, because there are about 400 sites that were sleep temples in the ancient world.
Well, I'm sorry.
So you could have been quite close by to one. But the thing that I like and I find most interesting with regards to trying to encourage lucid dreams, and especially trying to encourage useful lucid dreams, would be things like working with your own personal mythology. And this, I wanted to be a film director at school, and I wanted to be into film when I was a kid because my dreams were amazing and I wanted to film my dreams. And so film has always been, like, to me, the ultimate art form, because it's the closest to the dream experience. So yeah, I would say working with sort of creative art forms like film and writing is really useful, because in the process of doing that kind of work, you're having to imagine things, you're having to develop an imaginal space, and that can be really useful for dreams. It's my favorite way. Also playing Scrabble, because dreaming is so related somehow to language. Playing Scrabble, and also the sense that you get when you're playing Scrabble and you have like 7 tiles in your trough, and you kind of know you've got a 7-letter word before you know what that 7-letter word is. That sense, there's something weirdly lucid about that. And I think playing Scrabble encourages lucid dreaming. It's one of my more unusual tips for encouraging lucid dreaming.
That's amazing. Is there any specific time of the day or evening, or that it's preferable for engaging these lucid dreaming?
Lucid dreaming can be more likely to occur during afternoon naps sometimes. Generally speaking, lucid dreams occur just before you wake up. So because your brain and body are prioritizing the sort of deep sleep where cellular regeneration and detoxification occur, it isn't until later on in the night that you start to have longer and longer cycles of REM. So it's usually that last phase, which is why for most people, one of the best techniques is wake back to bed, where you will set your alarm for, say, 5:30 in the morning, spend a few moments not looking at devices and not really moving, perhaps trying to remember what dreams you were just having, and then try to go back to sleep for a bit. And then often people will find that's when they have their most vivid lucid dream experiences.
Now, before we go into your book and the various exercises, I wanted to mention that there have been instances that people can have precognitive dreams without being lucid. Is that also a possibility, or does it automatically follow that you need to have a lucid dream to then be able to have a precognitive experience?
I think probably the issue there is memory, because one of the defining features of being lucid and having a lucid dream is that you remember that dream. It doesn't evaporate upon waking like an ordinary dream might. So
Right.
that may be a reason why these precognitive visions are more likely to be remembered if they occur whilst you're in a lucid dream. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary now.
Oh, now lucid dream. How would you define lucid dream versus the standard definition? Your own experience.
I would say it's a dream in which, well, one of the defining features that doesn't get spoken about very much is that it can be an ecstatic experience. It's very often like an experience where you feel this incredible sense of bliss and ecstasy and happiness and joy. So that I would say is one of the best defining features of it. And I guess I would say that it's a dream in which you know who and where you are. You're conscious of who and where you are whilst you're in the dream. And it's an amazing experience in terms of time perception. I have a friend who is a sleep lab scientist in California, Daniel Oldis, who's actually taking part in our virtual Dream Palace program. And he has been doing experiments on time perception in lucidity. And talking to him was very interesting because there is this sense in a lucid dream where, you know, people often talk about how time perception is weird in dreams, that you experience like hours of time in a dream that in real life has only been like a few minutes or something. But with lucid dreaming, it's kind of different. You're supposed to be able to track real time accurately, but at the same time, there's this sort of richness, there's this unfolding of time where time seems to expand. And my theory of it, being within a lucid dream, is that you're able to experience any given moment from multiple perspectives. So time expands kind of in a sort of 3D way somehow. And so there's this richness and there's this expanded sense of time, but it isn't necessarily taking longer than you might think.
Now, when you talk about time perception, you talk about while you're having the dream.
Yeah. I mean, I when I started to study lucid dreaming and research it and really think about it, I often, because I've been lucid dreaming since I was a kid, I used to mostly use it for wish fulfillment, like what the boys I had a crush on at school I'd like kiss, or I'd get like brilliant Christmas presents or whatever. And then once I lost the ability for a while when I was sleep deprived, when I had my daughter 15 years ago now, I started to really appreciate just being lucid. And then when I was in the lucid state, I would ask the lucid state to show me something, or just shout it into the universe, and weird novel things would start happening then. So I really started to observe what was happening. And one of the things I noticed was this: you get this sense when you're in a lucid dream that you're not an avatar plonked into a dream world, that you are actively like the entire scene. It is an amazing expansive experience. And I think that's where the ecstasy comes from, of this dissolving of boundaries between you and the rest of the world, because you are everything within that dream world. It's a fantastic part of life. When I was little, I was always trying to find books, because I was quite a materialist, weirdly, as a kid. And I was always trying to find books that were about what the brain was doing during lucid dream periods. And I came to the conclusion that neurosurgeons or neurologists or neuroscientists must just be very will not have very exciting dream lives, because if you had an exciting dream life and you were a neuroscientist, it would be the first thing that you would want to study, because I think it holds the keys to a lot of elements of human consciousness that we don't understand very well, especially memory. That's why I find the fact that the ancient Greek goddess Mnemosyne, the personification of remembrance, was so important in ancient Greek sleep temples, because I think ancient people understood there was an art to memory, it was a power, and that in fact Mnemosyne, as the personification of remembrance, is in a way the muse of lucidity, the muse of dreams, because she's the mother of all the muses in the ancient Greek pantheon. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it's because the source of all inspiration is purest and best in lucid dreams.
Have you found that there is a, in terms of the narrative, clearly we can, going, let's say, ancient Greece or Egypt versus today's hyper tech world, in terms of people favoring these noetic or lucid experiences, in terms of that, a difference in terms of how, not just their appreciation, but how they're, in fact, that they're so much engaged to, say, their cell phones or their computers, is starting to impact that other realm, so to speak.
It takes it 100% is, but I actually think that because of virtual reality, we might find ourselves developing lucid dream skills again, kind of way. There's been studies into gamers, especially headset gamers, that have more lucid dreams, and I think that's because part of lucidity involves the sort of entrainment of looking at the world in a certain way. And with devices that we have currently, where you're looking at flat screens, you're looking at mobile screens, for example. I mean, I wrote in my book a little bit about how I think that we are accidentally traumatizing ourselves by looking at screens and scrolling, because the sorts of eye movements that are associated with rapidly scrolling are the kind of eye movements that are very similar to the eye movements that you make when you're experiencing stress and trauma. And if you look at something like EMDR, the therapy that uses eye movement to release trauma, that involves a practice that slows down your eye movements and makes you move from left to right, a much more natural and relaxed way of looking at the world. So when people are engaged with virtual reality, they're looking into a world and they're looking in the same way, even though, you know, they might be just living in their mum's basement and not doing anything else with their life. At least with their eyes, they're looking into a full world. And so that is conducive to the lucid dreaming experience, because it's the same. You find yourself in a very similar position when you're in a lucid dream, observing this three-dimensional world.
What do hemispheric studies suggest about the lucid state? I mean, in terms of left-right brain during sleep, is there any difference, neuroanatomical difference between that? I mean, so certainly a lot of scientists are investigating certain spiritual experiences tend to take place mostly in the parietal and the right parietal lobe and other areas of the brain. I'm wondering whether the same applies to dream states. Is there
you do have that same relationship in lucidity. And then one of the characteristics of lucid dreaming, as opposed to regular dreaming, is that your prefrontal cortex is activated, which is how you're able to self-reflect whilst being in a dream state.
Oh, isn't that something? So the prefrontal lobe is activated while, okay, got it. That's it. That's an interesting sort of a juxtaposition of non-ordinary states. So usually when the person is very active, and that's usually they're in sort of a beta state consciousness and they're not quite aware, but this is kind of an integration of two styles. What is your reading or your research into the Egyptians and the Greeks reveal about how they approach reality and approach the dream state? That is, did they feel there was a hard and fast separation, or did they feel that reality was between the dream state and the real, and what we call reality, was more fluid? I mean, what has your research revealed?
Well, I just find it amazing researching dreams in the ancient world, because there's something very honest about dream accounts. Aside from things like propaganda dream texts, where they're using the dream to show that a god visited someone in their dream and therefore they have the right to take over a country. Apart from that, the regular dream texts and the dream books and things like this, they're very honest because people are trying to find out what these dreams mean. As I said, there's this huge preoccupation with dreams predicting the future in some way, shape or form, or not even predicting the future, because there's this different notion of prophecy in the ancient world, whereby prophecy isn't just about predicting events that are going to occur in the future. It's also about revealing the truth. It's also about the veil falling from reality and seeing the world as it really is. I guess the most defining feature that differentiates most people's perception of dreaming now and the perception of dreaming in the ancient world is that there was this concept of the underworld, and the underworld that you visited in dreams was very often the same underworld that you visited when you died. So there's this strong relationship between death and the great sleep and your everyday sleep, definitely. And so dreaming offered this kind of window into that other world, this temporary pass into the other world where you could contact deceased people, you could contact gods, because very often the gods associated with healing live in the underworld. They're nearly always chthonic entities that regenerate human beings, because the underworld is seen as being this rich regenerative realm. And there was this very close relationship with whatever their idea was about the unconscious and dreaming and the underworld, the subzone of our reality. So I find that just absolutely fascinating. And dreams offer this way to appreciate and understand ancient perceptions of the world. And if you just think about the fact that, one of the most amazing things about dreaming these days is that if you have lost someone that you love, you can interact with them in a dream, and it can feel so real, and it can be hugely healing and helpful to have those kinds of contacts. And I think ancient people, I think they would have just considered that absolute proof that when you die, you just go somewhere else and you can still be visited in dreams, which is a lovely thought and a lovely way to think about the world, really.
All the more reason to be very aware, because presumably, I remember watching an interview with Rupert Sheldrake. He talks about that very question was asked, and he conjectures that exactly what happens. It's all the more reason to be aware of your own thinking and intentionality, because where your thoughts are, they will become real in that post-mortem state.
There's a really lovely quote by William Blake where he talks about on death, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, that you enter the imagination upon death. It's the same place you go to when you die. And so have a good imagination, because that's where you're going to end up.
Absolutely. That kind of makes sense. Now, in terms of the archetypal dreams, which I think that are certainly very distinct from your everyday, dream. How will you interact with that? I mean, dreams that are certainly seem to be almost extremely, they're very surrealistic and really very strange, but dealing with characters that represent specific, maybe power animals or wise guides and so on. How do you engage with those experiences? I mean, that's because I'm sure some people might have those. So how do they, instead of just forgetting about it, how do you build that relationship, say in the case of Carl Jung and Philemon, and it's like his wise teacher?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. But you look at someone like Carl Jung and how interested he was in mythology, and then how that informs his dream life. And I always think of dreams as being like our oeuvre. If we were an auteur, our dream life makes up the oeuvre of our, body of work. And you can tell, when I know a lot of people that are really into dreams, and if you were to show me like an example of dreams, I could probably make a good guess at who had dreamt that dream based upon what I know about these people. So they very much follow your own mythology and symbolism. And then every now and again you do have these like breakthrough dreams, but I think it helps to be engaged with actively thinking about dreaming and symbolism, mythology and archetypes and these kind of things. And then it's this sort of, I often say to people when people come to workshops, they might complain about having a lot of nightmares. And quite often it's because they watch a lot of horror movies. And, I always think about the things that I take in media-wise and film-wise and book-wise in particular. I couldn't read The Collector by John Fowles because it's so dark. That all of this stuff is like food for your dreaming mind, and therefore be careful about what you ingest because it can resurface in your dreams. Yeah, I think that I had a dream very recently, and this dream seemed to come out of nowhere. And then the next day, I realized that there had been a huge event. I knew that this event existed, but basically, I had a dream where I was initiated into this. It wasn't exactly a cult, but I was initiated by a woman. She put a scarf or a veil over my head, and she tapped the sign of the cross over my face. And then she pushed me, but when she pushed me, I kind of just dissolved into the universe, and it was like this ecstatic soup or ocean that I was falling into. It was an amazing experience. And I woke up really, really elated. And then later on in the day, a friend of mine who we're working with in Athens on the Dream Palace project said to me, "Oh, I'm in a funny mood today because it's the Assumption of the Virgin Mary." And it made me realize that the day that I had that dream was the day when 30,000 pilgrims visit this tiny church on the island of Tinos to incubate essentially a vision of the Virgin Mary, because there's this mythology around a vision, an apparition of the Virgin Mary appearing to a nun there, and they built a whole church because of it. Greek Orthodoxy is super interesting because it absorbed a lot of the pagan rituals and rites around dreaming. So it has this rich folkloric aspect to it as well.
It does seem like either in the dream state or in our own waking state during, say, synchronistic patterns, we're tapping into something larger, something a broader field. I mean, I had an experience when I do a lot of meditation every morning, and one of these a passage came up. You shall be as cunning as a wolf and as gentle as a lamb. And I was saying, this is interesting. I thought maybe it's from the Old Testament or Matthew. And yet what I found in Matthew was a little bit different. In Matthew, it says regarding snakes, you should be as shrewd as a snake and as gentle as a dove. So it came to me wondering, where did this passage come from? That is. And then I come across, by accident, Giordano Bruno's Inviculi. And he talks about, in the translation, precisely that. And I never read Giordano Bruno, never read of any of his collected works. He's talking about something almost identical about the wolf and the lamb. So again, that was a kind of a confirmation of kind of tapping into this richer, interconnected reality that I think is a lot more clear to us in the dream state.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what you experience in dreams quite often is that any thought, feeling, or emotion instantly manifests as something as a dream. So within the dream world, and you seem to have access to a far greater kind of library of information. So even stuff that you've just glanced or something someone's told you in conversation, I don't know, in the 80s, can pop up again. So those kinds of things are fascinating. I find like the memory aspects of dreaming one of the most interesting aspects of dreaming. And I think that people that are researching memories should look, and the function of memory should be looking at dreams more than anything else, perhaps, because it is such an interesting area, but difficult to study because sleep labs often don't have great results because it's hard to sleep in a sleep lab.
Yes, I can imagine being connected to all these various wires and so forth. Can only imagine that. But I found sometimes it's a little bit sleep deprived. Maybe, say for me, I need like 7 hours. If I get like 5 hours, I mean, I can just close my eyes and bang, I'm already in that kind of at least a very complex reality of images forming up almost out of nowhere. Whereas if I get a good night's sleep, it might take me a little while before I enter that REM cycle. What advice would you give people you mentioned earlier that it's important that for those who are interested in to build their kind of dream, I guess, book or dream dictionaries, because everybody's got their own personal mythology. How would they start going? How would they go about doing that? I mean,
I would start with thinking about previous dreams that have been really powerful for you, and also times in your life. I went to a conference once, and Stanley Krippner was there, who's amazing, a fantastic parapsychologist. And he was talking about personal mythology. He authored the book on personal mythology with David Feinstein. And he was talking about going back to like the most kind of ecstatic, dream-like experience of your life, of your waking life, and then trying to match that against a dream experience where you experienced ecstasy and bliss and joy, and just seeing what the different components are and trying to work out, I guess, what I think there's something about working out what is your kind of personal feng shui for ecstasy, because everyone has something that makes them really happy, I think. And sometimes those elements just work together, and you know, when all the elements are in the right order, you feel joy, like everything's perfect. Like I like sitting on high places, looking at views and engaging with nature. And so those are the things that tend to come up in my dreams when I begin to feel ecstatic and joyful. Or quite often I realize, you know, doing this exercise with Stanley Krippner, that one of my dream signifiers is a lioness or a big cat. And at first I'm a bit worried and scared about it. It's quite often in a zoo that has very flimsy fences. And then I realize I'm lucid, and so I stroke it a little bit, and then as that I kind of become emboldened, the animal will change.
Now, in terms of your work, your book came out early this year or late last year. The
Late last
initiation.
year in America, and then early this year in the UK.
What is it that obviously this wealth of knowledge that you bring to the book? It was stacking. At what point you decided, okay, I'm going to put it together, I'm going to get it out, I'm going to share it with the world? What is it what were the motivations, and what was your intention in moving and doing that?
I think it's because I always actually wanted to make a film about dreaming. Like
Okay.
Alexandra Jodorowsky's probably my favorite director that can give what I think a dream looks like to the screen. I think that his work is visually like really arresting and amazing. And, you know, if you watch, actually, he talks about psychomagic a lot, but if you watch Holy Mountain, and
Yes.
because it's this kind of psychomagic journey through the major arcana, you find that really works on the unconscious, and so it acts on the dreams, because everything's so vivid and bright and graphic that you often dream about those things. So it could be it can have amazing effects on your dreams, that film. So I've always wanted to make a film about dreams, so that's my ultimate goal. And I love stories, and I love sort of conjuring up visual imaginal worlds. So my book has 7, it's mostly non-fiction, but
Right.
because I think fiction works differently, we engage differently when we read fiction, because we're able to kind of imagine a bit more ourselves in a particular setting. I did my own dream incubation practices with each chapter, kind of sitting and meditating and then dreaming on the particular culture that I was studying. So I started off in ancient Anatolia, or maybe even before that, sort of Neolithic, Paleolithic, actually, Paleolithic cultures. And then any evidence that there is for incubation and for dream rituals and practices throughout these cultures, I studied and explored it. And then I incubated it to try to imagine myself back in that time and place. And the dream that came, I turned it into a story. And so there are 7 short stories throughout the book. And it also comes with a guided meditation. So each guided meditation is also influenced by the particular dream that came up as well. So they're all themed. So the idea is that it takes the reader through the kind of chronology of dream culture and history, and that throughout each chapter you can actively imagine yourself being in that place and time, and how dream culture worked for an individual.
And does each you mentioned 7, so does each is that specifically initiation degrees? I mean, do you
I
weave
suppose
that
so,
in?
yeah. The 7 rays, yeah. The
Right.
observation.
So each chapter sort of is almost preferable that you start with the first chapter, and that kind of moves you up the chain, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, what was really interesting for me in the course of writing the book is it didn't turn out exactly as I expected, because in the end, I guess, I came back to this idea that it's sort of all about the stars, all about recognizing that we are subject to the cosmos. And ancient people saw, especially in somewhere like Mesopotamia, it's really well recorded, but then previously in Anatolia, you had such a strong relationship between people and the stars. And I found, I just kept coming back to that because there's this really beautiful Sumerian word, Shitir Shamay, and it means the writing of heaven. And that expresses this idea of constellations being a kind of form of writing that you can read. So dream oracles and dream omens, they all come under this same idea of omens as being nighttime omens. So I think there's something about dreaming where people can get especially close to divine beings, because at night the stars and the planets are shining on us, and so therefore we can actually see the gods and goddesses and divine entities, and they can have more potent influences on our lives. There's this lovely term from Assyrian literature. One of the Assyriologist Erica Rayner coined this term astral irradiation, and it means leaving a patient or a charm, amulet, spell for a healing underneath the stars to absorb that heavenly radiance and promote healing and health for somebody.
And I'm also wondering on that note whether those very same stars exist inside our body. That is, they're just a reflection. One is a reflection of the other, as above as so below. But not just a reflection, but almost like what's there is a higher dimensional or some sort of reality that interpenetrates our body, but we can also see out there when we look into the heavens above.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we are deprived by light pollution, and we should do what we can to encourage dark skies. There are very, very few dark sky regions that are accessible for the majority of people in the world these days, which is very sad, I think, because I think it helps people to realize that they're part of the cosmos. And actually, it doesn't take much to cut off that realization if you're constantly living in a city, in a house where the sky is dimmed by street lights and things like this. That's one of those things for me, that when I have those divine epiphany moments in dreams, it's like seeing the northern lights or an incredible constellation or peering into a nebula. That is never going to not inspire someone.
On the theme of Jodorowsky, I recall recently, I sort of made the connection as going back to Philip K. Dick and how Philip K. Dick talks about this simulation that we live in. And for a long time, and a lot of scientists have been running with it, Neil deGrasse Tyson, some philosophers. But it also occurred to me, based upon the writings of Ian McGilchrist, when he refers to the left brain as it kind of simulates, it's a representation. And also with Jodorowsky at the very final scene, when he pulls up and it shows that his camera is surrounding the film set, that perhaps we're talking about exposing perhaps the overreach of the left brain. That is, the left brain is that maybe even Philip K. Dick was really talking about, maybe in his own words, about the simulation. It's not necessarily a universe that's created by some major designer, but it's basically about what's happening inside of us, that our reality is a simulation from mainly as a result of certain moves going back thousands of years, from more right brain to left brain.
Yeah, well, I've been interested in the work of Julian Jaynes, who's really into the bicameral mind theory, and I think although he gets ignored by neuroscientists these days, something interesting to contemplate, that our perception of reality has changed so much. And if our perception of reality has changed so much, then our experience of reality has changed so much. So we're living in a different world to some extent, and the left and right brain thing is interesting. And one thing I've found, because one of the most interesting, aside from yourself, Dan, who we also interviewed for the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour, one of my other favorite guests was Rebecca Sharrock. I don't know if you saw that one, but she has highly superior autobiographical memory. And it was amazing talking to her. And the first thing, when Tony told me we were going to be interviewing her, I said, oh, this is amazing, because that must mean she's lucid in all of her dreams, because being lucid is remembering yourself in a dream. And I couldn't wait to ask her, because, that's a fascinating part of this condition, is that you would be able to remember that you're dreaming all the time. So I asked her, and she does remember lucid dreams. And one of the things she remember all of her dreams are lucid. One of the things I really wanted to ask her is, I remember these dreams from being a toddler, where it was just all white. There was nothing but whiteness. I was in this white space. And then I remember as I grew older, first of all, like a single toy would appear, and then some people, mostly animals, my dog, and then grown-ups and my brothers. And so I wanted to ask her if she had this experience, because she says she can remember being in the womb even. I mean, she can't prove that she can, but she thinks she can remember being in the womb. But she said she had the white dreams as well, which I found really fascinating. And so there's definitely this, if you remember dreams from when you're really young, you do recognize that in the dream state, you know, I describe it as kind of psychic architecture. You're kind of constructing your own memory palace of sorts. You're creating sort of architectural and landscape forms that reflect your personality. It's like your personality is encoded in the architecture and the geography of the dream space. Because for a long time, and even now, I often still return to the same place in my dreams. It's like this constructed other world. And I think there's something about the kinds of films and books that I've been into throughout my life as well. Right. They fed into that. And so, you know, one of the books that I loved when I was a child was Alice in Wonderland, or The Adventures of Alice in Wonderland. And I loved J.G. Ballard novels when I was a teenager. And all of these have kind of influenced my dream aesthetic. And every now and again, I'll have a dream where it feels like, oh, this isn't I didn't make this dream somehow. It's like a weird, different aesthetic. So there's definitely something about that. And the more familiar you become with that landscape, then the more likely you are to become lucid, because you recognize, oh, I'm in that place, I'm near this thing, and it becomes easier to navigate. So one of the things, as well as dream journaling, because dream journaling often gets touted, you know, it is the best way of getting into a lucid dream practice. But one of the other things I'm really keen on, and I do it a lot in children's workshops as well, is dream mapping, where you map out your dreams and you draw it and you think about it and you try to create the sort of cartography of the dream space.
It's very interesting you bring up. I felt I didn't want to. Well, not that I didn't want to, but it's very synchronistic. You bring up whiteness, because that's exactly the series of dreams I've had. Especially it started during the pandemic. And I remember one night and I happened to live in one of my rooms is pitch black. It's like there's virtually no light going through. There's no window. It's just like and I remember in the sleep, and all of a sudden it's all white. It's like I'm staring at a white screen. And then I wake up and I said, I mean, this has lasted more than a second. I mean, and I said, but wait a minute, this is pitch black. How could that be? So I went back to sleep. And since then, I've had experiences, almost like transitional experiences, when I'm able to, right before the images start, literally, like your friend mentioned, superimpose on the dream screen. I turn on the light, and it's just all white, and then slowly these images start popping up, which is really cool. So I was just wondering about that. Is that part of it? And this is something that I've been keeping track of, but it gets to the point it's not quite under control, because there's almost a sense of allowing oneself to be receptive to that experience. The more I try to control it, the more that the darkness kicks in, or the more the light fades out. So, but it's interesting you bring this up, because that's something I never had in my life, and I only started having it since the pandemic.
Yeah, my sort of intuitive feeling about that is that it's a memory of where you came from. I did have a vision once. Like weird. It wasn't, you know, I kind of still knew where I was. It wasn't that weird or, you know, a mental breakdown, but I was at primary school crossing a zebra crossing, and I had this sudden vision epiphany that I came from stars, and I could sort of pre-see the faces of my brothers. And that was always, I was very philosophical when I was a kid. And I think that was because I had a lot of really amazing dream experiences. And I think there's also something about, I spent a lot of time in nature and engaging with animals. And there was something about observing the sort of patterns of nature and the patterns of life and non-verbal communication that helped me develop lucidity. I mean, I don't know. I didn't like my family very much. So I kind of went off into my own little world, and I lived in Croydon, which is a bit of a dump. So there was definitely an escapism element through dreaming and through creativity and reading books and thinking about making films and all this kind of stuff. So, but I also think there may be a kind of genetic thing to it, because everyone in my family seems to go on about weird dreams. So they could do that. I mean, there was some really sort of basic practical things insofar as when I was little, my dad built me a cabin bed. and I used to not want to get out of it in the middle of the night because it was really difficult. So I'd sort of stay in bed when I needed to go to the toilet, and I'd have to be lucid so that I didn't wet myself in bed. and little things like that. And I used to pretend that I had a dream helmet at the side of my bed in this secret cupboard, and I used to get it out and program it to what I wanted to dream about and put it on. So I accidentally invented all these like lucid dream hacks when I was a kid because I was really into it. And I remember reading, I think, the Wikipedia entry for Frederick van Eden, who coined the term lucidity. And he described in that, because I also was interested in Stephen LaBerge when I was a teenager, reinvigorated my interest in it. I thought that everyone had lucid dreams when I was really little. And then when I was a teenager, I sort of realized they didn't. And I remember Stephen LaBerge, I was always desperate to go on his Hawaiian retreat and try his Nova Dreamer. And I always found that a fascinating world. But yeah, lucid dreaming is kind of one of my favorite things about life. It's really, I think, mostly it just feels deeply, deeply creative. So if it's something you can encourage in your daily life, then I think it should be encouraged. And one thing it seems to really help with is giving you the overview effect on problems, on the kind of the small problems of life that you can often get a bit caught up in. Lucid dreaming is amazing at providing that overview experience somehow. So I had a dream. I remember reading something about the astronauts and how when they'd seen the Earth from space, they could never see a sunrise in the same way ever again. And I had a dream where I was standing on the moon looking at the Earth turning on its axis. And it felt exactly like when I woke up in the morning that I'd had the experience that an astronaut had. And when I saw the sunrise and the sunset, I had this real sense of, it just felt completely different because I was conscious and aware of the fact that we were turning and not the sun rising over the horizon.
That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the workshops you're holding now in coming up, right, in the mid September.
So I'm just about to go off to Greece. I am going to run 3 retreats. And these retreats, so I'm running retreats that are near ancient sleep temple sites. And one of the best ancient sleep temples is found at Epidavros, just south of Athens. And this is actually a huge sacred sleep sanctuary, really. It almost feels like we've been there recently. It feels like you're entering a divine city. It's encircled by a sacred grove. So it's kind of protected by trees. And then there are temples, streets, there's even a row of shops. And there was this idea in the ancient world that the dream healer god Asclepius could heal you in dreams. And so in order to receive these healing dreams, you'd go to his sanctuary, sacred precinct. You'd sleep in a dormitory called the Avaton. You'd lie down to incubate a dream. And during that process, he may visit you in a dream, and he may just spontaneously heal you by his touch or by some sort of supernatural intervention, or he may let you know what herbs or remedies or medical treatment is necessary for your cure. But there was this very mythological sense to it as well, because Asclepius was an underworld deity. He was living in Hades, in the underworld. So one of the structures there, the Themeli, is an altar to Asclepius, but the basement of it has these underground concentric circles that they think patients wandered as a kind of symbolic act of traveling through Hades. And the idea was that your sick self dies in the underworld and your healthy self is reborn to a much better, healthier, and vibrant life.
And this work, for those who are perhaps maybe even open to joining you, is that there's still seats or positions available?
Oh, yes, well, that's just the retreat. So the retreats are in Epidavros. It's an amazing place. I think we might have 1 place or 2 places left on those retreats. And then after that, we're running a 10-day residential program, like a 10-day deep dreaming residential program, where we have incredible artists in residence. I have a background in gig promotion. So one of the artists that I've wanted to host for about a decade now is the pioneer or the granddad of new age music, Yassos, who I absolutely love. He's amazing.
Yes.
And my friend Quintron, who is coming over from New Orleans. So Yassos is actually coming from Maui, Hawaii. Okay. And we have an amazing program of musicians that are really interested in deep listening, I guess. So it's like a deep listening program where people are encouraged to expand their experience of sound and music. Quintron has actually built this analog synthesizer that plays the weather. So it has a weather station component, which is set up out of doors. And this like is fed meteorological data. So it picks up wind speed, sunrise, rainfall, all these kinds of things, and then filters through this analog synthesizer that he then plays. So he's going to play the dawn, which will be quite exciting. And Yasos is going to do this. Yasos has been making visionary video art since the late 70s and early 80s as well. So he's going to do this multimedia concert, and his video art is absolutely amazing. Like I keep watching it thinking, I just don't know how he did this in the early 80s. It's amazing. And then we have a symposium at this grand neoclassical mansion in the heart of Athens, surrounded by a beautiful garden. We found this room that's very much like a kind of conference room. It's where they swear in new members of government and everything in Athens. So that's quite exciting. And we chose that because it has this amazing peristyle circular hall that kind of mirrors the Themeli, the grand structure at Epidavros, the throne room of Asclepius in the underworld. And then there are lots of deep listening concerts, parties and workshops, and all sorts of weird and wonderful presentations. It is going to be amazing. So we have 10 days of residency. And then we have a 3-day symposium as well in Athens as well. And if you can't make it to Athens, there's a quite impressive virtual Dream Palace program as well, which you can get into.
And where can they get this information? Which website?
The website is called isthisadreampalace.com.
Okay, that's the one we have listed below.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And for those who are just novices that want to start out with your book, I believe your book is available through Inner Traditions and any other ways besides Amazon.
Yeah. So Inner Traditions, it should be kind of everywhere. And there's also Audible of it as well.
Okay, fantastic. Well, hopefully for those who are just tuning in, this has been a very informative and enriching experience. I mean, any final words on how do they, if they just want to get the ball rolling with their dreams, and perhaps they say, well, no, maybe what would be the first thing? A dream journal, just your own personal mythology, or maybe just pick up your book?
Yeah, I think writing down, if often people are starting from a bit of a dream desert. So writing down any dream that you remember, first of all, and kind of decoding it could be quite useful. And then set some time aside. The practice that I really love, and it's an ancient practice, is this idea of dream incubation. So you write down what you want. You write down what you might want the answer to. So if you're working with a problem or you have a situation that you don't know the answer to, write down what you want. And it could also be write down who you want to meet or somewhere you want to go, but write something down and describe it. I do think there's a strong relationship between writing and dreaming. I think a lot of writers have really interesting dreams. So I think there's something there, and engaging with a pen on paper is really, I think there's something different that happens when you use a pen on paper and not typing stuff. You're using different parts of your brain. I think it somehow engages some of the same regions that are involved in more intense dreaming. So writing and drawing things and mapping things is really useful. So that's what I would suggest. And I would suggest, if at all possible, is setting some time aside for dream incubation during the day. So I do have on my YouTube channel and things like this, I have quite a few sleep hypnosis sessions that people can do as well. Okay. I've got my own personal website, which is themysteries.org. And there's several videos there where you can do meditations, guided meditations, and sleep hypnosis sessions.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a really exciting conversation. Have a wonderful time with your residency and workshops.
Thank you so much.
And hopefully we'll touch base maybe in another interview regarding your work with Rupert. I'm sure a lot of people are also interested. And
we should team up with the film side of the Dream Palace, actually, because film is the closest to dreaming that we've got. So we need to get you involved perhaps in the dream film programming.
Fantastic. I would love that.
Awesome.
Well, thank you again, Sarah Janes, author of Initiation into Dream Mysteries, drinking from the Pool of Mnemosyne. Hopefully I said that correctly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good luck and enjoy, and we'll see you again.
Great. Thank you. See you later, Dan.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Again, thank you all for joining us in this riveting conversation with Sarah Janes. For those who are, please click on the link below if you're on the YouTube channel or you're on Facebook. We really need your support. We don't have any sponsors. We really rely exclusively on your support. So please get the word out so we can continue to have these interviews. We're also going to be doing a festival. The Philip K. Dick Film Festival is taking place in France, the European Festival, October 27th and 28th, in Lille, France. For those who are interested, who will be in the area, more than happy to join us. There'll be many filmmakers. We'll be exploring definitely some films that actually have a lot to do with dreams. So, and if not, hope to see some of you in our the New York Festival in February of 2024. So again, thank you for joining me. Please support us. Please sign up so we can keep you on our newsletter, info at the philipkdickfilmfestival.com. And we'll hope to see you soon in our next installment. Thank you, and you have a good day. Bye-bye.